We appreciate you talking to us today, letting us come, and just wanted to ask if we have your permission to interview you and put it on videotape. And
You do.
And do we have your permission as well to use it with the Tom Murphy exhibit at the University of West Georgia and with the Bremen Museum Project?
Yes, you do.
All right, we appreciate it. Could you first state your full name and when you were born and where?
My full name is William Eugene Cook. Although everybody refers to me as Gene, that's how I'm known except to the government. And I was born in Harrison County and a native of Bremen. I was born May the 31st, 1928.
All right. And when did you come to know Tom Murphy?
It was 37 when I began to really know him. We moved into a house that is in the same block with Tom Murphy.
And tell me, do you remember his parents?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
His father was William Harvey Murphy, and I knew his mother well. She sat on the front porch of the house that they lived in. They lived in a house directly across Highway 27 across from the Methodist Church in a brick home. And I moved on Sharp Street, which was our house was directly behind their house. So I became to know his parents well. Mr. Murphy was operator at the Central of Georgia Railroad Depot here in Bremen. My father was section foreman of the Southern Railroad, since those two railroads crossed. But Mr. Murphy was in charge of everything in Bremen that concerned the Central of Georgia Railroad. So I knew him real well. Ms. Murphy, I of course knew as a parent, and she was very gentle, and I remember her mostly as sitting on the front porch as I came home in the afternoons, and she'd be in a rocking chair, and of course just generally bumping into it like us kids would do, in and out the house, and a few things like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any memory of Tom Murphy's three older brothers?
Yes. As I said, I lived behind Tom there. I really lived on Sharp Street, and our lot backed up to the Murphy property. And so I lived next door to Eugene Murphy, which was one of Tom's brothers. He had a son named Billy Gene Murphy, and Billy Gene later served as house photographer many years. Now the other brother I did not know. I'm thinking his name was Earl, but I'm not exactly sure. But I did know that he had three brothers, including James. And of course James was his brother that he lived with and took care of.
And what was Tom's personality like as a boy when you first got to know him?
He had a natural born leadership when we were small. He was a little older than myself and Harold Higgins and Leonard House and some other fellows there that lived next door or in the same block. And so he was a little older, and he had a leadership personality even then. When I'd go to school, which was located up where the library is now, I would not go down the street. I'd walk back to the pasture fence in the backyard, walk down there by their barn and driveway, and Tom would more than likely meet me down there, as well as Harold and Leonard and so on, and lead us across the street on many occasions and help us get across. So he had that leadership even back in those days, is what I remember mostly about him in the early days as far as leadership goes on. And we'd play games together in his yard and in the pasture. Their pasture was the local baseball field. And there would be some baseball games in the field, and of course they also had cattle in them. And so we would, there was not a house on the empty lot between Mr. Higgins' house and Tom's at the time, and we would play a little football and whatever on that lot. And we would even camp out sometimes in a tent. And so he was quite the leader, and I remember that we'd play a lot of cowboy and Indians back in those days, and Tom would always be the cowboy, and us younger boys the Indians, and he would always kill us all off, and you know, so he was a leader. So I remember him helping us out through those years.
Well, it sounds like he also tried to take care of you.
He did. We were always, like I say, good friends. When you walk through a fellow's carport every morning and he's there and his mother and daddy there, you get to be friends. So we've been friends for all these years, and on a lot of occasions he did include me later in years.
And you mentioned earlier you were in and out of the house some. Did you ever eat with them or do anything with them?
I did not remember eating or anything. You know, there was occasions when I might go into the house to maybe knock on the door and see if Tom was there or something like that, but I don't remember eating with them.
What was Bremen like back in that day when you were boys?
Well, I guess Bremen had about 1,500 people at that time, and the railroad was a major connection for people, not only passengers, but for freight. Of course, Mr. Murphy, Mr. Harvey, William Harvey, took care of the freight and everything, and my daddy would be a section foreman, and he and Mr. Murphy would get together every morning for orders. The streets in Main Street in Bremen wasn't paved, and on McPherson Street they had the first sidewalk and paved McPherson Street in about 38 or 39. And Highway 27 was paved, I guess, in the early 30s, just either following the Depression and so on.
What type of businesses were in town then?
What kind of businesses? Well, I worked for Marksman's Pharmacy when I was when I was younger, starting when I was 12 years old, and it was right in the middle of the main street downtown. Post office was next door, so, and then there was 2 grocery stores there, and then a jewelry shop, and a barber shop. And I can remember the barber, I believe his name was Westbrooks. He would have to stay open on Saturday nights till about 12 o'clock because all the people would come in out at the farms and so on, and he'd have a load. Then we had a late movie at 10 o'clock, and after I got off from work about 9, I'd go to that late movie. But downtown, Mr. H. Hoss, they called him Hoss Meeks. He was editor of the Bremen Gateway, and he was mayor for many years, real active in the Methodist Church. But he would not get that front street paved. So it rained bad one day, and some of the merchants hired this fellow who worked for the depot. He was a black fellow, but everybody knew him. They put a barrel out in that old muddy street, gave him a fishing pole in front of Mr. Meeks' office. So about the next week or two, paving started on the main street.
Now, you mentioned that a lot of people would come in on Saturdays from the farms. From how far around would they come into Bremen?
Oh, we had people, of course, from Buckhannon, Tallapoosa, and even some from Carrollton. Bremen, of course, was a major manufacturer of men's clothing and known as the clothing center of the South during those days. And Mr. Warren Sewell came to Bremen in the early 30s and started to plant, and then he talked Mr. Sam Hubbard into coming just after he came to put up a pant manufacturer. Warren Sewell's made suits and the Hubbards made pants, so that helped the economy tremendously. And at one peak time, those plants, if you took them all in Harrison County, worked about 3,000 people. And of course, those workers came from many distance as far as Heflin, Alabama and so on, because jobs were just scarce. And then there were 2 or 3 more plants started by Ray Sewell, Sr., and others at the Harris Shirt Company was located here and in Buchanan. So that was the economic growth and boom that started Bremen off. And now we don't have a sewing machine running in manufacturing in Harrison County, to my knowledge, unless it's heavy fire uniforms or something in Tallapoosa. But when they passed NAFTA, it killed the clothing industry in the United States, as well as Bremen, Winder, and other towns.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about church life in Bremen. What were the churches here at that time?
Well, of course, primary church was the Methodist and Baptist, and both of them had good leadership and dedicated members. I've been a member of the Methodist Church all my life. I was born a Methodist. It goes back to my mother and my grandfather, and very active in both churches, and they cooperated with each other, and they expanded through the years. Of course, the Methodist Church is located on Highway 27 North, which is it's across from where Tom grew up, and it expanded 3 times. It was built in 1938 in its present facility. The Baptist Church was, those 2 churches in history were on, I believe it's Buchanan Street is the name of the street, and one was close to the other, but they both got torn down in 38 and they both relocated. And of course the Baptist Church is over on 78 going toward Temple and Villarica. And they're in a big expansion program now, which you probably saw coming in.
It's interesting that they were both torn down in the same year and rebuilt. Do you know of any reason why that would have happened that way?
No, I don't know of any reason except a need for expansion and just a need for an old church to be not used anymore, just sort of worn out. And it was a coincidence because all the lumber from the 2 churches were bought by a person, and he put most of that lumber back into housing, and there's some houses was built with that lumber, as well as about 3 apartments across the street from where it was.
And those houses still standing?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Tom Murphy in interviews has talked very much about being a Baptist, and also a primitive Baptist.
Yes.
Were you familiar with that at all? That his father was a primitive Baptist lay minister and all like that?
I was very familiar that he was, and that Tom attended the Primitive Baptist Church. He was dedicated to that church and attended that church most of the time. Now his family belonged to my church, Methodist Church, Mike and Mary and Martha and Lynn. So he would come to church with them a good bit in the Methodist Church, but he was highly dedicated to the Primitive Church. And when he died, the Primitive minister had part in the program, so he always remembered him.
Was his wife Methodist?
I believe she went with him to the Primitive Baptist Church and to the Baptist Church some, is what I remember. Agnes was a year younger than I was, and but I think that's what happened. But like I say, the other family went to the Methodist Church, and she came some too also.
Okay.
But see, I knew her in high school real well.
Okay, I want to talk to you about her. So you were in high school together, 1 year apart.
That's correct.
And tell me about her.
Well, she was Agnes Bennett, and lived about halfway between Bremen and Waco, and grew up there. And her father was in the lumber business, primarily cutting trees and owning property. And so she came to Bremen, and like I say, a year younger. And then Tom and I had a friend younger than we were, Randall Williamson. Randall was 2 years younger than I, and he had a date one night and got Tom a blind date with Agnes. I think that's the way the memory goes. Or Randall had the date, and Tom was impressed with Agnes, so he asked her for a date the next night, and it ended up that he married Agnes. And Randall always got credit for it. Randall was later a minister in the Methodist Church, was district superintendent and aide to the bishop, so he was quite a friend of Tom Murphy's also.
I heard that Agnes was a very good athlete, a very good basketball player.
She was. I saw her play basketball. It was several girls in her class. It was a prime basketball players. Hazel Kerbo and some others. Betty Flint was in my room. But she was a real good basketball player. And of course they were first team players and did all the playing for the first team.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about how the school was set up in Bremen.
Well, we had a very sort of small school. One wing was made up of the grammar school, and then in the middle sat the high school with a big two-story columns, and then on the right of that was the gymnasium. And the first grade through the fourth grade was in the elementary area of the school, and then starting with the fifth grade through the 11th grade. I'm old enough to have just had 11 grades. It was in the high school, 5th through the 11th.
Who were some of the teachers that stand out in your memory as being there?
Well, in the 4th grade was Ms. Holland, and she was quite dedicated. She was a sister-in-law of Hoyt Broadwell, who was a major person in Bremen, and then Miss White, she was a 5th grade teacher, and she was real good and outstanding. The two people, I guess, that had more effect was Miss Golden. She was the 11th grade teacher and taught English, and she was real good. And then Mr. and Ms. Hatchett. Mr. Hatchett was superintendent of schools and acted as superintendent and principal. Ms. Hatchett was drama and commercial teacher, and I had them for several years, and they were quite, they contributed a lot to me and all the students for their leadership. In fact, Mr. Hatchett had to coach us one year because we lost our coach to the Army. And she was real good with drama and had plays every year with the junior and senior class and so on. So those two really stand out with me.
And Mr. Hatchett, did he coach the football team?
He coached one year. We the first year that I played, we had a coach the full year. The next year, the coach got drafted. Mr. Hatchett had to finish the coaching that year. And then the next year, J.D. Langley came. And then our senior year, we didn't have a coach at all, but he called him Mr. Ernest Golden, who had coached and taught in Bremen schools. He lived in Buckhannon. He was retired and attended SMU University when he was young. And so he called down and coached us, and Mr. Hatchett. And it made me help him schedule all the games and so on, and arrange transportation. But he was real active with us, sure was.
I have heard that Tom Murphy really loved baseball and played baseball in school and also played for the town team. Do you have any memories of that?
Well, I have more memories of him playing in that Murphy pasture. And but I was aware that he played baseball and softball, and he was real, athletic. and did a lot of boxing and so on and during his time. So he was not only a good leader and with a great mind, but he also liked athletics.
Mm-hmm. What type of jobs did the two of you do around town? Did you have little things? You mentioned you worked in the drugstore.
Right.
And what other type work did you do as a boy? And then what type of little jobs did he do?
Well, at 8 years old, I started delivering the Atlanta Journal for Mr. Lige Reed and delivered papers till I was 12 years old. And then I joined the Scouts, and I got a recommendation to go to work for Marksman's Pharmacy, which was a drugstore here in Bremen at the time, and of course closed now. But and I worked there until 44. Then I started to work for Garrett Drug Company in 44 and worked even through my college days. Mr. Garrett was very good to me, and he would let me work when I came home between sessions at school, and he'd find me something to do just so I could get a little pay. So I remember him real well, being good to me.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember Tom doing jobs around town?
Well, I really don't. He, of course, 4 years difference, he left to go to North Georgia College, and then he went into the Navy, and so that sort of took care of it. So I was not aware of what all he did in high school as far as the job itself.
Mm-hmm. Was there any indication then that he was interested in politics at all?
Well, he was a leader, and it's no doubt in my mind that he ended up in politics. So, but in the earlier years that I knew him, I did not know that he would end up as Speaker of the House.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to ask you about as far as teachers and all went, did you ever know of a Mrs. Fields who taught Sunday school at the Methodist Church?
Yes.
Were you ever a student of hers in class?
No, I wasn't. She taught a different class, and I was not directly in her class. But I think that Tom was, when he did come to the church across the street, he went into her class, is what I remember. But I did not have her as a teacher in the church when I was there.
Mm-hmm. What type of student was Tom? I know you weren't the same age as him, but did he show interest in school and learning and all?
Yeah, of course, Tom had a mind that he did what he needed to do. That was a good saying of his, I'll do what I need to do. And he, of course, schools like Bremen with 1,500 people didn't have all the learning from teachers and in-depth study. And when he got to Georgia, he felt that. And I did too when I went to Chattanooga for the first year. We did not have chemistry. We did not have but one class of algebra. And when we got to college, we were faced with mathematics and chemistry, and the average mind was way behind compared with some of the Atlanta schools that taught all those studies. So Tom was in about the same worry, but he got by pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I know, let's see, you mentioned that he went to North Georgia, and do you know how he selected North Georgia out of all the places to go? You have any memory of that at all?
No, I don't remember specifically why he chose North Georgia at that time. However, in later years, he always felt like North Georgia College was the best little school you could go for the money. You not only got good training, but you also got military leadership. And he was always proud of North Georgia College, so I think it's just sort of natural that he knew about North Georgia College being military, and it's a good place where the tuition was not great, especially if you took military. So I feel like that's the reason he went to North Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned you went to school in Chattanooga?
Yes, I was awarded Bremen's first full scholarship, athletic scholarship. Went to Chattanooga for a year. Played with University of Chattanooga.
Okay.
Then I came back to West Georgia in '46 and played on their first football team. And so when Charlie Trippi and those Army boys started coming back from the Army, I knew that I couldn't compete against those fellas, although I did have the privilege of playing against Charlie Trippi. And I went into the dressing room and talked to him, and that was quite a treat. And I shared that with Tom later on.
Wow. How was it playing against him?
Oh, he was so good. They beat us 28-12, and he had just got out of the Army and wasn't in full shape like he would be as a star that he was, but he basically won the ball game for him.
Mm-hmm.
Chattanooga played about 5 Southeastern Conference schools that year, and Georgia and Tennessee were the 2 that beat Chattanooga that year.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Were you aware when Mr. Murphy ran for his first office on the school board?
I was aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
although basically, you know, he left to go to school, and then later I left to go to school, and of course we got separated and so on, but I knew that he had come back to Bremen after he got his degree to practice law with his brother James. And he, being a natural leader, he was interested in the school system. And he ran for a school board and won, and was later chairman for many years.
So he became chairman of the school board?
That's my knowledge, he was chairman.
Okay. Were you aware of his law practice at all? How?
Oh yes.
And,
He practiced law with his brother James, and they had a good reputation. James was a good lawyer. He later developed arthritis to the extent that it completely crippled him. And Tom, he got to where he could not get in and out the car or get off the steps at his home to go to his office. Well, with me working early at the drugstore, I would go by most every day, walk by their house to get downtown myself. And he would be lifting James off the porch in his arms and putting him in the car. It was very touching to me. In fact, there's a song that, he's not so heavy, he's my brother. And I always think about Tom Murphy when that happens.
Yeah, we've heard the story too about carrying him up the steps at the courthouse and to get to the courtroom as well. So he was very devoted to him. He also gives him a lot of credit, James, a lot of credit for shaping him as a person. That's
correct, because he loved all of his brothers, but of course in the situation where he's practiced the law with James, James had taught him so much, and James had a brilliant mind also. And the crippling arthritis just got him where he couldn't, go, and without Tom, he just couldn't have practiced in their law firm. So he was real close to James all those years. And I also know I knew he had to carry him up the steps, but when you walk by every day and see him most every day, it's a little bit more touching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. James had been, I think, briefly in the house before he was.
That's correct. He was in the house. He was the first Murphy in the house, I think, and then there was a Harold Murphy who was a cousin of them that was also, I believe, in the house. And then Tom came along and was in the house.
Was it, so he moved from being in local office to going to Atlanta? Did that surprise you at all, that he decided to make that decision to run for the
No,
House?
it didn't surprise me at all. He ran against, I believe, Mr. W.O. Strickland, who was I believe, the legislator at that time. Now, my memory is not all that great, but I think that's who it was. And he defeated him and went on to the House. And then, of course, from there, he had the ability to go where he did. And I think that he was a natural called leader to come to Georgia at the time. Now, I want to tell you a little bit more about that. He went through, of course, all those years as the longest speaker in the United States that held that office in the House. And he had a lot of things that affected Georgia and the nation. For instance, we had, I believe, 2 recessions, and one in the 60s and one in the 70s that he had to overcome. And then we had the Civil Rights Bill that went into effect in 1964 that he had to deal with, and he did it mightily good. He was able, with his thoughts and background, to run the state of Georgia with that and take care of those black legislators and invite them to take part, and later invited them to be leaders in the House. So I think he was called to be in the House at a particular time he was in the House and for all those years.
If you, and this is just your opinion, but this is something I wonder, think about a lot. If you were to put your finger on what type of traits, what type of leadership traits and skills he brought to the job, what would you say those were?
Well, his thinking of what was going on and how to cure or help what was going on was just amazing. He could take any situation that came up in that House, and he worked through the representatives themselves. He didn't want them to be yes men. He made them participate and come to him and talk to him about the situation. And even in big business, like in Columbus, when a lot of money in Columbus, Blanchard's with Synovus and the other big industries down there, he would work through Mr. Representative Luck down there to help negotiate with them anything that was going on. So he had a natural leadership ability there.
Sounds like he used personal skills, interpersonal skills in going and talking to people one-on-one.
He did. And he did that, as I said. He called his, when they'd come into his office and start talking about something, previously they were going to expect the speaker to tell them exactly what to do. Well, he told them, I don't want you to be a yes man. And you express your opinion. I'll decide, but you express your opinion.
Looking at the different challenges that he had as speaker, one of them being, you mentioned you had African Americans beginning to be elected and come into the legislature. You had women coming into the legislature. It became a different world than the world he had entered when he was a young legislator.
That's correct. Sure did. One of the biggest changes that ever happened in the United States. And he in Georgia knew how to take care of it. He could figure that out. He sat there and thought about it and says, well, we've got to do this in order for the future to be right.
He was also very committed. In interviews he's talked about his great commitment to the Democratic Party.
Oh, he was a giant Democrat, that's for sure. And if you don't believe it, ask some of those young Republicans that came in there in the early days. I would get real sorry for him if I was in the legislature. But he had a purpose and he knew how to do it. And then behind the scenes, he wasn't as rough with them. He eventually, after a few years, he gave them some, little leadership, and he gave them advice. I have, when Johnny Isakson ran for governor, I was talking with Tom one day, and I says, Tom, I believe you might be faced with a Republican governor. He says, well, Eugene, and he always called me Eugene, and rather than Gene. He says, well, Eugene, if I gotta serve for a Republican governor, I'd rather for it be Johnny Ives than anybody I know.
He was very committed to his House members too, wasn't he?
Right, sure was.
In thinking about the number of governors he served under, I think 5 governors, did he ever talk to you or give any indication of his relationship with them as Speaker?
Well, not any just relationships. I know that most of them he was worked real close with. I think he and Governor Carter didn't agree on a lot of things, and there were some issues and some maybe with some others, but no great issues that he couldn't work out, or he and the governor couldn't work out. So Carter was the only one that I remember that he had some issues with.
He had an interesting relationship with Zell Miller.
Yes, of course, I not being in Atlanta all the time, but he did have some, but I don't know exactly what they were.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you another question about his commitment to the Democratic Party. I would assume that it was because of FDR and seeing what FDR did for the people during the Depression. And do you think I'm correct on that, or?
Well, I think that would have had an influence on him, but you know, the Democratic Party was just strong in Bremen, Georgia. And in Georgia at the time, there was hardly a Republican Party at all when he was growing up, so he was a natural born Democrat. I think that that's where he got his Democratic loyalty, because it was a strong party at the time that he was going to run for the legislature.
Okay.
One other thing he was talking about, his leadership and so on, had a funny instance to happen. They have a wild hog supper on Sunday nights before the legislature, and he had invited me to come, and it was held at a big hotel right there on I-20 before, close to the baseball stadium. And at one point during all the music, Jose Williams gets up on stage and starts dancing. Well, here comes Tom Murphy, and I said, uh-oh, he's fixing to get Jose off of the stage. He did not get him off the stage, he got up there and danced with him. He knew how to handle people.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So, were you in Atlanta a good bit, attending functions that he would invite you to?
I was there some. I didn't go to that many. I was there for some functions, like I just said, and of course he would invite us to some of the larger meetings that was held in the, during the year, and so we got to go to some with his help. He particularly went to Millen, Georgia. They had a big fish fry in honor of him every year, and it was a big affair in Jenkins County. And we lived in Jenkins County 2 years when I was with the Thompson Company. I was manager of Thompson Company, and I got to know all the people there. Jean did too. She knew them better than I did. And so he went down there a lot, and the other places a lot, to be friends of a lot of people, in a lot of counties and within the state. So he invited me one time. You didn't fly in as a non-legislature in the plane, but the plane had an empty seat. You could invite somebody. So one time he had an empty seat in the plane. He invited me to fly from here to Millen with him to that fish fry. So he's always real good about that.
That's good. So he certainly never forgot Harrison County.
No, not till the day he died. He was active with people, or till he had his stroke. I'll put it like that. Mm-hmm. He was active with people and defending his friends and so on, active in practice, until he had his stroke.
Mm-hmm. As a legislator, he certainly was tremendous for the state of Georgia. What kind of things did he do for Haralson County? You mentioned his law practice that he was continuing. What else did he do that you can remember?
Well, he was so good at law practice that Mr. Warren Sewell called him one day and says, "Come to my office." And Tom couldn't figure out what that was about. And he got in Mr. Warren Sewell's office and sat down, and Mr. Warren says, "Well," says Tom, says, "I want to hire you as my lawyer. We don't ever have any cases hardly, but I don't want to somebody suing me and you not defending me." And he put Tom on a basis where he paid him every year whether he did anything or not until Tom died, or until Warren Sewell's discontinued business. And Mr. Hubbard did the same thing. So the Bremen people thought a lot of him and his ability to practice law, which he learned a lot from his brother James.
Did he, of course he was in the same town with, I get, people who were captains of industry. Did he have any dealings with them much at all?
You mean with the owners?
Yeah, with the owners.
Well, like I say, that he would visit them on occasions, and he would be their representative in most cases. And so I know that he was always real friendly to everybody. And so I don't know, of course, some of that would be confidential and I wouldn't know about it, but I know that everybody, the leadership of Bremen was real respectful of Tom Murphy and his abilities that owned the plants in Bremen. One other thing he did in Bremen, if he ran for an office, he would start early and go out, be at the doors of all these plants on different days and different hours, like lunch. He'd be handing out cards and pencils. So he did not forget that you run every so many years, I think it was 2 years, and so he was out, talking to the people all the time. And then one thing that a lot of us liked, that there was a group that gathered at Garrett Drugstore on Sundays throughout the years. When I was even working there, I had to serve them. And Tom was one of them. And he would come in with a lot of the leaders, Johnny Capsule and a lot of the leaders in Bremen, and we'd gather in the drugstore. And he would, they'd talk about everything except politics usually, but he was that way.
If you were to just, looking back on his career and what he did for the state of Georgia, what are the things that stand out for you as his greatest achievements?
Well, of course, serving as long as he did, he had so many achievements that it's hard to maybe pick one out. I think I go back to the 1964 issue where he was a man that in the right place at the right time for Georgia to lead us through that particular crisis.
Seemed like that he just had a wonderful way of taking his small town roots, relating to rural areas, small towns, but also being able to relate to people in Atlanta, people in big cities. That
was part of his leadership, because you know, there's a banquet room at the World Congress Center, I believe, in his name. And then we have in Bremen the technical school, Thomas B. Murphy campus. In Dalton, Georgia, you have the building that he helped get built. You know, it's sort of what you call a trade building or whatever it is. And it was his way of all over the state. And he knew that Atlanta needed things just like Bremen, Georgia needed things. And you can see the World Congress Center and other things that he participated in over there to get that going. A lot of it people don't know, but he had a lot of leadership in Atlanta, Georgia, and got things done for them, so to speak.
It's interesting to me that he was so influential and so powerful in politics, and a lot of people did not know what he was doing. Did he keep a low profile? What do you think?
About profile?
Yeah, he was so powerful. He was there for so long. He was doing so much, but people really don't know, many people, what he did.
That's correct. He did it through all of his legislators. And give you an example. We had, after I retired, I was driving cars for Clayton Motors. There was a fellow that I was friends with that drove with me. And he was going to vote against Tom. And one day he asked me to carry him to the school to pick up his son. He didn't have his car or something. I forgot what the issue was. And on the way, I says, what field is he going to be on? He told me it's going to be behind the gymnasium. I says, well, Tom has just arranged for Bremen Schools to get a donation of several $1,000s to finish that field. And your son's out there playing on it. Why are you going to vote for him? That was always I never could understand that, but it's just the way people were. But he was always doing something for the community, whether it's Bremen or Dalton or Millen, Thompson, Georgia, or wherever. When I was living in Thompson and Midland, I got many calls. Hey, Gene, you know the speaker, could you talk to him about this? I'd weigh them, and on 3 or 4 occasions I did come to him and talk to him about them, and he solved them. One was the county, McDuffie County was going to be split into 2 or 3 legislative districts. And of course the mayors and county commissioners were real upset about it. They called me to the courthouse and asked me what I talked to Tom about. Tom says, I understand and I'll help you with it. And he did, so he could do things like that. Mm-hmm. And I rarely asked him to do anything politically, but if I thought it was for the benefit of Georgia, I'd talk to him about it. He would weigh the situation and says, yes, Gene, or no, Gene. Hmm. He would tell me right off.
That's one thing people talk a lot about, that he was straight. He was straight with you, and he wanted people to be straight with him.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct.
In 2002, he lost that election. Why do you think he lost that one?
Well, you can't figure. I've never been able to figure out why people would vote against a speaker in their district with the power that Tom Murphy had, regardless. And it's just been a mystery to me as to why that happened. I won't get into it in fine lines, but in my opinion, I don't care whether you're a speaker from Muskogee County or Jenkins County or McDuffie County or your district. I think if you got a good, clean Speaker of the House, you don't vote against them when they're doing things for you.
How did he take that loss?
I'm sure he took it like I would have taken it. It's tough. That's what I think.
Not too long after that, he had a stroke, disabling stroke. Do you remember when that happened?
Yes. And I went to see him on several occasions.
What was his life like at that point?
Not good. He was paralyzed primarily on one side. He could not speak clearly. He could make his eyes and maybe nod. And when Gene and I would visit him, that's about what he would do. We would take his good hand and work with it. Mm-hmm. So he was quite a fellow. Of course, we didn't get to stay together a lot after we graduated from high school, but we saw a lot of each other from time to time between the drugstore and him. And when I go to the legislature, I didn't go to the legislature a lot, but I remember his mind was so keen that I was sitting up in the balcony one day. I wanted to sit up there. And the vote was just real close. And they had, both sides had argued it and argued it. And when the vote was called, it was a tie. Immediately when that clock said it was a tie, he says, the vote ties, the speaker votes nay, it loses. I mean, it was split second, just like that. And he had that type thought. He didn't, it was a quick vote. I had to use it one time in a meeting I was chairman of. But I learned it from him.
So you sat in the balcony and you got to see him in action.
Oh yeah, that was where I liked him. Well, Bobby Dwelly ran his was aide in his office, and through Bobby, he was from Millen, Georgia, and helped set up those fish fries and so on. But he was an aide in the office, and when the house got full, you couldn't get out in the house to be a spectator. But I could go to Bobby, and I knew him real well, and he'd edge us in sometimes. So I knew him also.
What do you think it meant to Tom Murphy to be Speaker of the House of Georgia?
Well, I think it satisfied his leadership ability that he had in his mind. Like if you're a born leader, you got to be going all the time. And whether it was school board or representative or Speaker of the House, he just had that born desire for leadership. And that's the reason he was Speaker of the House. And then he developed it so well, he was the longest standing Speaker of the House in the United States.
It seems to me that there were times when he had to take a lot of heat for it. I know that he got a lot of heat from the Atlanta newspapers, and he took a lot. And so he took a lot of hits, he took a lot of jabs and everything like that. How did he seem to handle that type of pressure?
You never did notice it. He handled it within himself, so he did not ever reveal it to me, other than I maybe could read it a little on his face, but he took it and went with it.
It sounds like he talked to you a good bit, through all this period. When he was here in Bremen, it almost seemed like he was just one of the folks. He was.
You'd never know he was Speaker of the House if he was a new person that came into Bremen, went to the drugstore, and he came in and said, if they did not know it, they wouldn't have found out through him. He didn't talk politics out in the drugstore and everything. He talked friendship. So.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you want to share about him that you can think of that I didn't touch on?
We've touched on a lot of things. I can't. I just get back to his seeing pick up James and so on, but we talked about that, and his devotion to his family. I don't think we've talked about his devotion to Agnes after they got married. Then they had 4 children: Mike, Mary, Lynn, and
Martha?
Martha, yeah. Thank you. At 82, I need some help. But anyway, he was always highly devoted to his family. Starting with James, when he wasn't married, then carrying it on when he was married, and through his family. His family was always first. And so I always admired him for being a family man. Even after Agnes died, he was a highly good father, grandfather, so on. So he had a lot of devotion there. And that's one thing that always stands out, I think, not only to me, but other people that he knew, or to Bremen. I know that Mary Oxendine, I hope I don't get Mary Oxendine, she married Oxendine, and he was wheelchair bound for several years with an illness. And I've seen Tom roll him in different places, like a wedding or reception or something like that locally. So he was devoted not only to Mary, but to her husband and to Martha and to Mike and Carol and so on. So he had a great devotion for his family.
One thing I thought about when you were talking about him, Will, and his son-in-law, is in interviews he often says that he was a fiscal conservative and a bleeding heart liberal when it came to old people, babies, and the infirm. Had you ever heard him say that?
Yes. He was particularly aware of disabled people because of James. And there was an instance in the legislature one day where somebody said something a little out of place about a person that was disabled or an able bill or something, I forgot. Boy, he got mad and took the well and spoke, cried. So he did have some things like that he was particularly interested in, or hurt him if somebody did somebody wrong.
There's nothing like personal experience, is there?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think